What if I told you the reason you check your phone 50 times a day and the reason you overspend at Target are literally the same psychological mechanism? One that casinos figured out decades ago, and now every app, retailer, and social platform is using on you right now. Here's the uncomfortable truth about your money brain. It wasn't built for the modern world. It was built for a savannah where unpredictability meant danger or dinner. And some very smart, very well-funded people are exploiting exactly that ancient wiring to reach into your wallet every single day. The mechanism is called variable reward. F. Skinner stumbled onto it in the 1950s when he was running experiments on pigeons. He noticed something strange. When he gave pigeons a food pellet every single time they pressed a lever, they'd press it calmly, predictably. But when he made the reward random, sometimes a pellet, sometimes nothing, the pigeons became almost frantic. They pressed the lever compulsively, far more than they ever did on a reliable schedule. Plain language version: your brain goes harder for maybe than it does for yes. Certainty is boring to your dopamine system. Uncertainty, that's where the fireworks happen. Dopamine, the chemical your brain releases in anticipation of a reward, spikes highest not when you get the reward, but when the outcome is unpredictable. The not knowing is the drug. And here's what makes this so dangerous for your finances. The same neural pathway that makes gambling addictive is activated every time you open a shopping app, scroll a social feed, or scratch a loyalty card. You are, in a very measurable neurological sense, pulling a slot machine lever. The house just doesn't look like a casino anymore. It looks like a checkout screen. Pull up for a second, because before this gets abstract, I want you to meet Marcus. Marcus is 34, earns a solid income, has no significant debt, and considers himself pretty financially responsible. He packs his lunch. He doesn't buy expensive cars. By every surface-level measure, Marcus has his money brain under control, but Marcus has a routine. Every morning he opens a retail app, one of those apps that shows you a limited flash sale, different every day, and he just browses. He tells himself he's just looking. He's not going to buy anything unless it's a genuinely great deal. Over 18 months, Marcus spent just under $4,000 on that app, not in big dramatic splurges. In $30, $40, $60 increments that each felt completely justified because each one was a deal. A great deal. A deal that wouldn't be there tomorrow. When Marcus actually sat down and added it up, which he only did because his partner asked where the savings account had gone, he was genuinely shocked. He described it like waking up from a fog. And that fog has a name. It's the variable reward loop. Marcus never knew if today's flash sale would be ordinary or extraordinary. That uncertainty kept him coming back. And every time he bought something, his brain logged. Lever pressed, pellet received, come back tomorrow. The app's designers knew exactly what they were building. Marcus had no idea he was the pigeon. Here's the twist that should genuinely unsettle you. Marcus's story isn't a retail problem. It's an everywhere problem. Because once you see the variable reward loop, you cannot unsee it, and it is absolutely everywhere your money lives. Casinos perfected the hardware. Slot machines are engineered so that near misses, 2 cherries and then a lemon, trigger almost the same dopamine response as a win. That's not an accident. That's a design specification. Retail apps borrow the same architecture. The daily deal that might be amazing or might be nothing. The mystery box. The spin-the-wheel discount at checkout. These aren't marketing gimmicks. They are variable ratio reinforcement schedules dressed in a brand's color palette. Social commerce. Shopping triggered directly by social feeds. Layers in social unpredictability on top of product unpredictability. You don't know if you'll see a post that makes you feel inadequate, inspired, or entertained. That scroll is the lever. The purchase is the pellet. Even physical retail is in on it. The treasure hunt model that certain big box stores built their entire identity around depends on you not knowing whether today's visit will yield something extraordinary. So you go back. And while you're there looking for the one remarkable thing, you fill a cart with 20 ordinary things. The playbook is identical across all of these environments. What changes is only the costume. And your brain, bless it, falls for the costume every single time because it's responding to the underlying reward structure, not the surface appearance. Let's make this personal, because the mechanism sounds interesting as a psychology lecture and absolutely devastating when you run the actual numbers on your own life. Marcus spent $4,000 over 18 months in increments that felt like smart deals. But the real cost isn't $4,000. Here's what I mean. If Marcus had been 34 and had invested that same $4,000 instead in something boring and reliable, say a broad index fund, and left it alone until he was 65, that money would be worth somewhere in the range of $22,000 to $26,000, depending on average market returns. He didn't lose $4,000. He lost more than $20,000 in future purchasing power. He paid for the feeling of winning a deal with his retirement. And Marcus isn't unusual. Research consistently shows that small, frequent, emotionally justified purchases are the category most people systematically underestimate in their budgets. We track the big decisions, the car, the vacation, the appliance. We completely overlook the variable reward spending because each individual instance felt rational. It was a deal. It was a good price. It was on sale. Your brain doesn't experience the accumulated total. It only ever experiences the single transaction in front of it. And in that single transaction, the reward loop has already fired. The dopamine has already landed. You already feel like a winner. The long-term cost is entirely invisible at the moment of purchase, which is precisely when the decision is made. That gap between how the purchase feels and what it actually costs is where a significant portion of your financial future quietly disappears. I want to be clear about something because this is where a lot of financial content gets it wrong. You are not weak. You are not undisciplined. You are not bad with money because you fall for this. You fall for it because you are a human being with a nervous system that was optimized over hundreds of thousands of years for a world that no longer exists. The variable reward mechanism kept your ancestors alive. Unpredictable food sources, unpredictable social outcomes, unpredictable dangers. A brain that stayed alert and engaged with uncertainty had a survival advantage. You inherited that brain. It's a good brain. It's just operating in an environment it was never designed for, against adversaries who have billion-dollar budgets and decades of behavioral research specifically aimed at making it misfire. The apps are not neutral. The store layouts are not accidental. The game mechanics inside your retail and financial apps were built by teams of engineers and behavioral scientists whose entire job is to maximize the number of times you pull the lever. This is not paranoia. It's in their product documentation and their investor presentations, because willpower alone is not a strategy. Willpower is a resource that depletes. The variable reward loop does not deplete. It is patient in a way that human self-control simply cannot match. You cannot out-discipline a system designed by 1,000 engineers to defeat your discipline. You need a different approach entirely. So here's what actually works, not because it eliminates the mechanism, which it won't, but because it changes your relationship with the lever. First, create friction deliberately. The variable reward loop thrives on zero-friction access. Delete the apps from your home screen, not from your phone, just from instant access. That extra 2 taps of finding and opening the app is sometimes genuinely enough to interrupt the automatic behavior before your dopamine system takes over. Researchers call this implementation friction, and the data behind it is surprisingly strong for something so simple. Second, schedule your browsing. This sounds almost insultingly simple, but it works by converting an unpredictable behavior into a predictable one. If you tell yourself, I check deals on Sunday at noon for 20 minutes, you've moved from reactive variable reward-driven behavior to intentional scheduled behavior. The unpredictability that feeds the loop is substantially reduced. Third, build a 24-hour rule for any unplanned purchase above a threshold you set. Maybe it's $30, maybe it's $100. Put it in a saved cart or a note and come back tomorrow. What you're doing is forcing the prefrontal cortex, your rational, long-term planning brain, back into the decision after the dopamine spike has faded. Most of the time, tomorrow you doesn't buy it. And tomorrow you has access to the actual math. Fourth, and I think this is the most powerful, is simply knowing the number. Not vaguely knowing you spend too much on apps and impulse buys, but actually calculating what your variable reward spending costs you in future value. Because a $30 impulse buy feels very different when your brain genuinely understands it as 200 future dollars. You can't unsee that math once you see it. And that's exactly why I built what I built. The variable reward loop is running in the background of almost every financial decision you make, and most people never even learn its name. Now you do. Your money brain doesn't switch off when it comes to retirement. That's exactly where these biases cost the most. I built a free tool that shows you the real math, no spreadsheet required. It's called Granary, links in the description.